Let's start part two with Kimmi Cantrell with Careers in Nonprofits.
So, how should a job seeker make themselves known? Should they just email you? I'm not trying to solicit emails for you, by the way, but just broadly for people in your world.
Of course. Honestly, I'm trying to think of what gets my attention the best. And honestly, when people, and everybody's different, so I'm speaking for myself.
Mm-hmm.
When people message me on LinkedIn, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a response from me unless it's not, a LinkedIn appropriate message.
Yeah.
But when people, job seekers message me, even if they're totally not in my region, they're on the other side of the country, they aren't even looking for nonprofit, like I'm very much more likely going to respond to that versus a cold email.
Mm.
However, I do also, one of the things I think that sets CNP apart again is that we really do try to reply to most people if we have connected with you before, or even if, you are just like, hey, I saw your post on LinkedIn and I wanted to reach out via email. I think that's one thing we really try to do. We obviously can't reply to everybody because we get hundreds of applicants a day. But, for example, if I worked with you 2 months ago and then you write into me again, I want to at least acknowledge that I got your application and that, I'll get back to you if you're a good fit, etc.
Well, and this sounds like a good argument to keep your LinkedIn profile up to date, to make sure that you're active on that platform, particularly.
Totally. And where it's really helpful, I think, and a tip of advice I would perhaps give to people is, if you send an application and you know who the person is, go just connect with them on LinkedIn too, because that's 2 touches from you that helps me recall, like, oh, there's Matt Hug. That's what he looks like. That he just sent me an email that then triggers my memory to want to go respond if I haven't already. And so I think, it's the same with sales or prospecting. The more touches you get, the more likely you are to get a response. And I think the same goes obviously for virtual human connection. The more times that I see your name, the more I'm going to be like, oh, I recall you. I remember you. You're, it just creates a repetition for the person on the receiving end. So,
well, especially I find that when I'm reaching out for like new content experts, I will send them an email, assuming I can get their email address, or and do LinkedIn and maybe a voicemail, because people communicate in all different ways.
Exactly.
And you don't know what their sweet spot of communication is, and then they'll respond to you the way that they feel best.
Exactly. And, let's say if I posted a job today, I'm going to have 300 emails in my inbox just today. And so if you're one of those emails, it's very possible that I hardly see it because there's 300 other ones that I'm looking at. But if you then also send me a message on LinkedIn and it's like, hey, I just reached out to you via email, I'm looking forward to connecting, etc., then I'm more intentional to go and look for that email. So I know that's for myself. I really can't speak on behalf of anybody else in the world. But I know scientifically that if you reach out more than one time, you're more likely to be remembered by that person.
So that kind of begs another question, which is, so if that same person sent their resume and a cover letter on paper to you, would that even get your attention more?
Right now, no, because of COVID.
All right, because you're not necessarily
from.
Oh, okay. You weren't sure if they licked it or something.
Exactly.
Or sneezed on it.
You don't know. And honestly, true transparency, right now, like things move so fast. By the time your mail gets to me, like I could already be done recruiting for that position.
Fair enough.
So I don't know that that is the most effective way to do things anymore. I definitely these days would not encourage, people used to stop by offices. Like I definitely wouldn't do that. And I know that cold calling about a position is very not something that's attractive to my team. It's like, if you send me an email, I'll get back to you. But just calling to say, like, I wanted to see if you got my application, like chances are, yes, we received the application. And we get so many calls already that, sometimes that is not the best form of follow-up. And so I personally would say that email and LinkedIn simultaneously are the best ways to follow up on an application.
That's really good. Thank you. So what's, in your opinion, the number one action somebody should take to find a job in the nonprofit sector broadly?
Network. And I
Okay.
know that that is really challenging these days, but we're doing it right now. It's not too hard to find ways to meet new people. But even if that's just like we were just talking about, like reaching out to other people on LinkedIn, but I know that the nonprofit sector is a very, um, it's not completely this way, but it's a lot of who you know and versus what you know. Because if you know somebody who is a hiring manager and you come with a background that matches not at all what they're looking for, but they actually know who you are, you're a lot more likely to get that referral or to get, um, to be a part of the discussion. And so I think the more people you can network with, and not only just network of saying like, this is who I am and this is my elevator pitch, but verbalizing what it is that you want, making your dreams come true to other people. So saying, yeah, I'm Kimmy and I'm looking for a job that looks like this. If you see anything, let me know. Or if I can help you on that project, let me know. And just verbalizing how you want to add value to that relationship or how you hope that that person can add value to you. Because so often we're too busy just trying to meet people and grab business cards and just introduce who we are, but we never actually say what we're hoping to get out of this opportunity. And if you're just transparent of like, quite frankly, I'm looking for a job and I'm looking for a job that looks like this. If you know anybody or you hear anything, please consider me. And keeping in touch with those people, I think that really goes a long way. Because for me, when I was job searching, nothing happened for me until I started to meet people. Just putting in application after application after application is just, there's no energy behind it. Whereas even if you have a strongly written cover letter, it's just not the same as a personal connection. And so I think the more that you can reach out to people on LinkedIn, go to networking events like this, exchange emails with people. Like, for example, between Matt and I, we met through networking because we were in touch via somebody who's not related to either of us at all. And then it put us in touch to be able to do things like this. And so I think just not being afraid to connect with people, because you just never know how someone else can help you get your mission accomplished, and then vice versa.
So that you kind of lead into the next question here, which is, does someone need to have worked at a nonprofit before to get a job at a nonprofit?
It's a great question. We get that one a lot. And the short answer is no, though it can be more challenging because I think one of the things within the nonprofit sector, and I do think that this is evolving, but I feel like there are two different worlds, right? The nonprofit sector and the for-profit sector. And everybody who's in the for-profit sector thinks that the nonprofit sector doesn't make any money. And, all they do is like all this mission-driven work, but it's just not true. I mean, people have built their whole careers in the nonprofit sector and make great money and make great impact, and it's great. So I think that you have to help the person understand why it is that you are trying to make this change. And a lot of time it's just because you've been doing all this work and you find you're not passionate about it and you want to do something that makes you feel good to wake up and do every day. And so, I think just being able to articulate why you're trying to make that change is really important. But it definitely, you have to help the person see why you'd be a great asset for that role. Because the last thing anybody wants is to fall in love with an applicant who comes from the for-profit sector, who they get all the way to the final rounds, and they maybe even hire them, but because they don't pay what they're used to, or they, don't have the same structure as a for-profit company, they don't have the same benefits package, etc., that then they're going to stay for a month or two and then they're going to leave and they're going to go back to the for-profit sector.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my best tip of advice to people, when you're job searching, that person wants to fill the job. They want you to be the one, they want you to be the one who's going to stay and love it and be amazing. because they don't want to hire for it anymore. Hiring is stressful. That's why people like me exist, because we can take the stress off people's plate. But nobody wants to have openings in their organization. It's not, it's really stressful. And so if you can just help them see that you are the answer to their problem, you are the solution, you will add value in certain ways, and you're going to stay, you're not going to leave after 6 months. That's really what the person's looking for, is, can this person fulfill what it is I'm looking for? Are they going to do it well? And are they going to do it for a long enough time that I don't have to hire for this again anytime soon?
All right. So I think you've kind of addressed this, but I'll ask it anyway. One of the people on today's call said, I've spent much of my career in education as a high school teacher and a college administrator. She's confident that her skill set would be of value to a nonprofit, but she doesn't seem to be marketing herself effectively, and she's looking for advice on that.
Yep. I think very similarly, just ties into what I just mentioned, is making sure that you are very intentional with outlining why you want to make this change and how what you have done previously will be a positive impact for that organization. I similarly, I came from an education background too. And I, at that point in time, knew that the skill sets that I had were going to be really valuable for any employer, but I had to help them see why, because otherwise it's like, why would you want a job like this? It's so different. Why are you wanting to change? And so really just being very intentional, and that takes time. Take some time to yourself and write down bullet points. Why do I want to do this? What am I hoping to get out of this? How is this going to make myself better? How's it going to make the world a better place? And once you get really specific on those things, it makes it a lot easier to sell that moving forward, because that's what you're doing. You're really selling yourself to the person on the other end, the hiring manager, and wanting them to see the value too. And so that's really where I think the sweet spot is.
So it's kind of related to what you kind of touched on this before, but have you noticed a bias against hiring from the business sector among your clients?
I don't know that I would call it a bias. I just think, again, people really want to not have to, that people don't want to make a bad hire. And what I mean by a bad hire is a hire that then doesn't last and then falls through, and they're back hiring again, within 6 months.
Well, it's a high risk activity and it takes a lot of time.
It costs a lot of money, quite frankly. Having a position vacant costs the organization a lot of money, and then having it filled with the wrong person costs a lot of money. And so, I think it's, I don't want to say it's fear-based, because I can't speak on behalf of a lot of people, but I think a lot of times when you see somebody whose background is maybe different than what your organization does, you have a hesitancy, because you're like, well, I just want to make sure that they're going to fit right into this mold. And sometimes we don't really need that, but we don't know that we don't need that. And I think it's where a recruiter helps, because, a lot of times our organizations will come to us and they'll say, I need somebody, we just had somebody leave and I want a exact replica of them. I want them to have this. And a lot of times we find ourselves saying, I hear you, but maybe we could consider something like this, because though you're saying that you want these things, here's why these could be very valuable. And so I think that's also why it's helpful to partner with multiple different firms, because they'll be working on multiple different opportunities for you. And so then they have the opportunity to more advocate for the candidates. And I can't even tell you how many times we'll submit resumes and they'll come back and say, I want to interview one or two of them. And we'll say, I really think you should interview the rest. Just trust me on this one. And then they do, and then they hire one of those people. Whereas if you're just submitting a resume and you don't have anybody advocating for you, if they've already made up their mind, they've made up their mind. And so that's, I'm obviously biased. I think staffing firms are, but I think you should.
You can be that advocate, but again, back to the networking, if they have somebody who knows that person who is in the hiring position, that person can be their advocate too.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that can make a big difference. So kind of, what's your number one challenge when it comes to candidates themselves? What are they, are their expectations off, or are they thinking, either about you, about what you're doing, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say probably where we find the most friction is, again, when they've put all their eggs in one basket and we are that basket. Because, like I mentioned, we're a pretty small firm. And so just even the quantities of searches that we work on are minimal in comparison to some of our competitors. There's larger staffing firms such as, Robert Half, most people have heard of them, Randstad Staffing, Beacon Hill, they just have their width is just so much larger than ours. And so when people find us, we find that they really, are attracted to us because we're very personal and we're very, endearing, and we're very passionate about the nonprofit sector. And so they are really just expecting us to find them that perfect job within their time frame. And we just can't guarantee that. And we're very transparent about it, but sometimes people just don't hear it, or they don't realize it until it's happening. And so I think that's where it gets the most frustrating, is when they reach out to us each month and they're like, I haven't heard from you, and it's like, well, I don't have anything, I have nothing for you, so what are you looking for? And so I think that's really where it can feel the most frustrating, is when a pressure is put onto us, because I'm very empathetic and I take it very personally, and I hate letting people down, and so I don't want to let people down. And so I want them to recognize that I'm keeping you in mind. Like, we have systems in place that even if I forget who you are, I've got your name written down. Like, we want to help you. That's our job.
It's funny. It sounds very much to me like when I talk to people about grant proposal writing, when I say, a program officer is a person too.
Yes.
They're not just an ATM.
Right. Well, and we're talking earlier about, I think it was Lynn that was mentioning like applicant tracking systems. We don't even have those. Every time your resume comes to us, it comes to my inbox. There's no tracking system.
You're not parsing resumes electronically to figure out. No.
And so, I think not forgetting that exactly that, like we want to help you. We want to fill these open positions. Like, our intentions are in the right place, but we just encourage you to put your eggs in multiple baskets.
Well,
reach out to multiple firms, multiple people.
So do you ever tell people that, what, you have deficiencies that need to be addressed before we can go out and work with somebody?
Yes. And that's a very difficult conversation to have. And honestly, most of the time it is, it's like, it's not skill set, right? It's soft skills. It's somebody who is in this example, like exceptionally, let's say, pushy. I don't want to advocate on behalf of somebody that I feel like could go off at any moment, because I can't trust that they're going to represent me well. And at the end of the day, I have to feel comfortable, with my relationship with perhaps this client that I've had for 5-10 years. I don't want them to be like, why would you, like, why would you do that? And so I think, that's really where the conversations get difficult, because again, I don't want to upset anybody. And so it's very hard to say, quite frankly, even if I had something, I wouldn't put you forward for it because of XYZ reasons. And so I would say, with that in mind, just be yourself. Like, sometimes people are given the advice that they need to be pushy and aggressive with recruiters because recruiters are pushy and aggressive, which is just a stereotype. And so I just do not like, if that's not who you are, there's no sense in doing that, because it's just not going to move you forward the way I think you hope that it will. And so, it's important to be confident. It's important to really believe in the fact that you'd be a great fit for a certain position, but not to the extent that it's going to tarnish a relationship in the process.
You're not one of these, anything short of a court order kind of a restraining order.
You're right.
So what's your biggest challenge with your clients, with your nonprofits who are seeking people?
Yes, being very tunnel visioned. So, like I gave the example earlier of saying, I need this, and I will settle for nothing less. And, I tried to help people see what a recruiter position is like by equating it to kind of like a real estate agent. you can create a new build house, but otherwise, like, you can say all you want on your wish list all day long, but if the house doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And that's the same with human beings, like I don't create these candidates. They were born, decades ago, and we're just hoping that we stumble into them. But we can't guarantee that we'll find a person with exactly what you're looking for, because they're humans. It's not a product that we go and create. And so sometimes that can be where the challenge is helping the client understand, like, what you're looking for is too much of a stretch, and
particularly at the money they want to pay.
Exactly. And people like to say, find me the unicorn or the needle in the haystack. And sure, like, do we find amazing people all the time? Yes. But if you don't have an open mindset to what that could look like, because it could look like a dozen different things, so I think having them have an open mindset is where we can find that challenge. And so that's where we train our staff a lot on, to make sure that they feel very confident in their ability to hear what a client wants, recite that back to them, but then also open their mind to be a little more creative too. Because maybe you think you want somebody who has exactly this experience, but maybe you'd actually really benefit from somebody who has this, because I would add some dynamic, attributes to your organization.
Do you help them evaluate that?
Mm-hmm.
So you'll do some sort of analysis to say, this is the kind, based on what you want to do and your objectives, this is where you think we ought to go instead of here.
Yep. And even, a lot of times, that's part of our job, is to just like have that creativity going on. So there's a lot of times when somebody will say to us, I need it to look exactly like this. And literally in that moment, we're saying, well, have you ever considered this instead? Like, for example, if we'll keep using development because that's where we are. So if somebody's worked in sales before, that's exactly the same as development and fundraising. And so
we'll have that conversation sometime.
If they say, I need somebody, they can only come from the nonprofit sector doing development. Well, if they've done, account management for a large sales company,
you're right.
If they need somebody who's really, straight edge and all that, a lot of times maybe coming from for-profit would add that to your organization. And so they'll know the word sales freaks people out in the nonprofit sector because they don't want to think of it that way, but it's the same. And sure, it's a nonprofit organization, but you must have profit, because otherwise you can't pay your people, otherwise you can't, function.
Yeah, you have to have that surplus. You have to be able to do that.
It's just different words, and so I think helping them see, okay, I hear you, but consider this person, or even somebody who's coming from a membership background. There's a lot of ways that people have the same skill set to acquire money. It just may have a different title than what they're looking for.
So actually, you brought up something very interesting to me, at least, is that do you feel like you need to acclimatize non-nonprofit people into the nonprofit culture?
Mm-hmm. You're asking if we feel like,
is that an issue you face, is when you bring somebody from the outside, you have to say, okay, this is, so they're thinking, oh, it's sales, but the people in the nonprofit are going to push back at the word sales and kind of transition them into that culture of how to use the language and work better?
I would say sometimes. However, there has been a relative evolution of more people making that transition. And so I'm actually finding more often these days that if I'm working with like an HR manager, because sometimes we work with somebody in HR, so it's like we're both the middle people, so like they're connecting with the hiring manager and we're connecting with the candidate. But if I'm working directly with the hiring manager, if it's just the person who's the supervisor, it's just a different conversation. But I will find that a lot of times these days, the person in HR has also come from a for-profit background. And so they'll say things like, I came from this type of background, so I'm open to it. But then they may have to convince the hiring manager that they're open to it too, just because it can, people don't like what's different, right? People are afraid of change, and people are afraid of making the wrong decision. And I think it's easy to go with what but that's just not always what's the best way to go. And so I think that's why it's helpful to have advocates like, HR managers who are in that position, and then like organizations like ours, because we can advocate for you even when you don't have the opportunity to.
That sounds good. So how do you help potential candidates with their skills? When you have to present them to a client, right? So do you work with them on cleaning up their resume? Do you tell them wear the blue tie instead of the red tie? I don't know. I mean, how do you buy a new suit?
We definitely, for like every person that walks through our door, we don't really make a whole lot of waves in terms of their materials unless it's like blaring. And so what I mean by that is you have a huge typo on your resume, or it's 16 pages long, or something ridiculous. Which, by the way, if you have that many pages, I'm letting you know now you should not. But definitely will
go to academia. They like those.
Right. So we definitely have, but we're not a resume editing service.
Right.
But if we are working with you on a position, we will help you understand how maybe you could tweak your current resume to make it fit more for this position. We also read over your cover letters to make sure that there's no, errors or things that even sometimes we send cover letters back to people and say, this is honestly just a bit too generic. Can you please make it more specific for this position? Because we know that our clients appreciate that. We know that they want to know, like, they want to read your cover letter and feel it in their heart, like they want to feel it in their own heartstrings. It's one thing if you're applying to a generic position, but when you're working through a firm, like, we know that they want that. So we do provide stuff like that. We do also, just as a firm, sometimes we will offer different like workshops, so that people can just learn different. But to be quite honest, you could speak to 30 different people and you'll get 30 different opinions on what's the best way to have your resume done. And at the end of the day, keep it concise, 2 to 3 pages, and make sure it looks aesthetically pleasing. But at the end of the day, the resume doesn't get you the job, you do. And you just have to get your experience onto the resume enough to get somebody to want to talk to you. But, spending hours and hours just trying to make the resume perfect is just never going to, that's not what's going to get you hired. What's going to get you hired is those interviews and those conversations that you have with the people that are looking to fill the position. And so that's what you need to focus on, is like, is this resume going to get someone's attention enough to get me in the door? Because that's what I need. I need to just get that conversation and get in the door. So all that to say, no, we don't do a resume editing service, but there's tons of people out there that do. Tons of people who have great intentions. Again, I wouldn't spend too much money on something along those lines, but definitely make the investment if that's something that's not your strength, because there's a lot of great people out there that can help you with that. And we do also have a service called Career Mapping that our president and founder, Norris Harrigan Pedersen, she puts on. And it is she does both. She does just like a workshop where it's like a couple hour long workshop. And then she also does like weekly coaching sessions if you want to sign up for that too. But really what the career mapping is intended to do is to help you recognize that you're in the driver's seat of your career. And so instead of just being at the mercy of whoever responds to your job application, but instead saying, okay, I'm in this job and this is my ultimate goal. What do I do today to make sure that I get there? And what step do I take next in my career to make sure that I get there? So that's something that we do offer as well. And you can find out more information about that on our website.
Okay, cool. And so is there other materials that a candidate should have when they talk to you or anybody about a job in nonprofits besides the resume? Do they need a portfolio? Do they need, I don't know, what else could there be?
Usually, honestly. And if we do need it, we'll ask for it. And so I think that's one thing, people, the amount of portfolios I've been shown is, I appreciate looking at people's work. I think it's fascinating, but rarely does it move on to the next person because it's just not required. And so I would say, again, like if it's not asked for us, I can't speak on behalf of any other firm or application process. But if it says in the job description, please submit a portfolio and a resume, then submit a portfolio. But otherwise, we really just are looking at your resume initially. And then sometimes we do get to the point where we do need a portfolio, but it really depends on the position. And really the only time I've seen portfolio helpful is for like graphic design or marketing positions. So that would be my response, is that most of the time we just need a resume. Sometimes we do need the cover letter, but for that initial phone conversation, we're really just looking for the resume.